All right, hello everybody. So great to see you all today. I'm Emily Campbell, and in addition to the shape of AI, which I'll be talking about, I'm also the VP of Design at Hacker Inc. as of this summer. So I work with design teams and designers on how we start to integrate AI into our workflow, looking at the patterns of how this new technology is shaping what we do, how we do it, and how we think about what we're creating. So the Shape of AI is a side project that I started last spring, documenting the patterns that I'm seeing in the wild. I will be coming back to this in a moment, but actually before we talk about AI, just a couple caveats, and then we're going to dive into a little bit of the history of interaction design to know where we're coming from. This is not an AI hype talk. I don't have answers. I'm actually going to leave you probably with more questions than answers. But I want to just share the observations that I'm seeing about how this is reshaping interaction design as a whole and what it could possibly mean for where we're going. So let's actually start way, way back in about 60 to 80 years ago. When we think about the early stages of computing, we often think about these mainframe computers that were popping up in the 1960s, taking up huge rooms in our research institutions. But actually, a lot was happening around this time. In 1948, we had a book published on cybernetics, the first time that somebody is positing the idea that human behavior maybe can be automated, or at least we can use probability to replicate some of the things that humans and animals do naturally. There was a conference at Dartmouth in the 1950s where they actually coined the term artificial intelligence all the way back then. Just a side note, the reason they picked artificial intelligence was because they didn't want to bias towards one of the many disciplines represented there. Just a fun thing we'll revisit in a second about why this term. And ELIZA, which was created in the 1960s at MIT, is actually the first natural language processing AI bot. So this was all happening back in the middle of the last century, and here we are today. So I just want to prime us with the fact that this whole AI thing has been with us for a while, and that's interesting, because if we jump forward to where we're going, we start with this period of human-computer interaction that's pretty passive, right? And yet we had AI, we had this technology. They didn't have the problems of today, so what else has been happening in the meantime? Well, this has been happening. We've gone from a world in that era when computing was very passive. It was call and response. I have something, I need an answer from the computer, to suddenly computers are all around us. So we have Apple putting a computer in every household in the 1980s. This guy as well, which, fun fact, there's an entire gallery of thirst traps of Bill Gates in Getty Images. It's really fun to spend an hour in there. We have these guys, right? Once everybody has computers and we start to bring the internet into our homes, we move from this world of computers in these big rooms at these research institutions to computers in our living rooms. If you were a kid in the 90s, you knew, as we were all getting online, we were getting these CD-ROMs everywhere that we went. But even in this time, information was still pretty passive. When you wanted something, you would go to these major websites where everything was sort of consolidated in one place. Of course, it wasn't just the information. You also were met with all these lovely pop-ups. But still, it was kind of this mode of push and pull. So these computers, rather than waiting for me to specifically ask for something, would push some content to me. Maybe I could go in search of something. And then, of course, everything else is these pop-ups. Then we move into this social world. So now, I'm not just interacting with this information. I'm interacting with other people's information. And it was pretty passive at first. Then this guy shows up. And now all of these devices are with us. So we're starting to get all these notifications from our friends all the time, which means the incentives of companies start to shift. They're all vying for a little bit of our attention. And it just becomes this algorithmic world. So we get sucked from this world of, I'm going to enter a room, ask something of the computer, and get an answer, to I'm just going to be bombarded with information. It happens at work, and we all become part of the algorithm. We all are out there trying to get likes, going to the same place and taking the same pictures. In fact, there's even an entire website that just exists to show all of the websites that look like the linear website. So we're all guilty of it too. So, okay, why start here if we're talking about AI? So this is all supposed to be hyper-personalized. But actually what's been happening is the incentive structures of these businesses, the availability of these technologies, have resulted in something that is more performance-oriented. Computing now exists to extract from us, to take from us. We are no longer agents of our own experience. There's a saying from Muhammad Ali, who's a boxer from the United States: everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And we have conditioned ourselves to being punched in the face over and over and over again, and none of us know how to get out of it, and then this shows up, right? That's where we are right now. And that's why I want to talk about this history before we talk about what's happening with AI. Because there's so much concern around what AI is going to do to us and to our culture and how we communicate, but the cheapening of content was already happening. The cheapening of attention was already happening. So maybe it's not just about AI, but rather how we use this new technology and how we apply it in the current way that our society operates and is incentivized to behave. So I want to go through these three things, and I mentioned I have more questions than answers. I don't have enough time to go into the depth that we need for this, but that's okay. I want to just kind of show you what I've been observing and what I've been learning so that you can go on this journey with me and start your own journey, whether you're using AI at work today or just getting started. But let's start first about this whole interaction pattern thing. So coming back to our little history, this was the original pattern of interaction. I need an answer, the computer gives me a response. And then we move into this world where maybe the computer gives me a decent answer, but it also starts to give me a bunch of everything else. It's the pop-ups and the content I wasn't necessarily looking for. And then soon, a lot of that also filters through what other people are doing. Oh, I've got my pop-ups. Then it starts to filter through what other people are doing. So now all of these friends that I'm following, and of course this gets harder and harder and harder as things do become algorithmic, begin to change what I see. And then we start getting this. And these companies go, oh my gosh, this is so overwhelming, let's fix it. Let's put an algorithm into place. But nobody knows what the algorithm does. It's a complete black box. It starts to hide some of the results. We get pushed into these bubbles, and we start to see things we didn't expect, or maybe we don't want. And also, we all start to just do this and stop looking for the information in the first place. It's not demure, y'all. Okay, why AI? Maybe, and this is what I want you all to leave with, maybe AI actually can help us fix this problem if we're intentional about it. Maybe AI can help us get that agency back if we use it in the right way or in an intentional way. So think about this. Somebody comes in with some intent, and they want an answer. That's our basic model. That's where we started. But now there's everything in the middle. Now there's all those algorithms. Now there's all that content. Now there's all those people. But here's what AI can do for us. It lets individuals interact with the system. It takes us back to the mainframe. But instead, it's the mainframe in our back pocket or on our watch or in our laptop. We now can tune the machine ourselves. We can say, hey, that's not what I wanted, or put this in a different medium, or go and search different sources, or just do this differently. I don't like this. We can even help individuals, we can help users get better at asking the computer things, at querying the computers. So everyone can be one of those computer programmers in these mainframes. And I realize this is a somewhat optimistic view, and we'll talk about the challenges in just a moment, but there is an opportunity to reset the trust that we have with computers, to reset the agency, and to see this technology not as a threat and not even as a solution, but as a partner, as something we can work with. Now, I also don't want to gloss over the fact that there's a lot of problems with it. And there's a lot of problems with the fact that the companies that are deploying it have problems. So let's not gloss over that. We're just going to call this the bad place. The biases, the dark patterns, they all exist, but they exist already. And that's the thing that I want to emphasize. So there is this new model of interactivity that's starting to emerge. And now we can talk about the patterns of what we're seeing in AI. And if you're working, designing, leading a team working with AI, some of these might be familiar, and maybe some might be new to you. If you haven't had a chance to play with Perplexity, it's a really amazing tool, and it captures a lot of these patterns in a very interesting way. So I want to start here. Perplexity is, at its basic, a search engine. So you have some question, you go to it, you ask the question. This is something I was curious about. I wanted to know about AI knowledge collapse, speaking of the bad place. But you'll notice it doesn't look like Google. There's a few other things here. Here I'm going to step into the light and start to point at my screen. I can choose where I want it to focus its information. I can say, hey, just go grab academic sources, or just look at social sources, which right now just means Reddit. But I can tune the lens in. I can give attachments. I can say, hey, as you're looking through this, I want you to actually reference this PDF, this academic article I'm interested in, and then go find other things that maybe back this up, or maybe argue against it. That's really powerful. Number two, I can see the computer thinking. It shows me its work. It shows me what it's doing, and in some cases where this pattern of showing the work is populating, you actually can step in and go, no, don't do it that way, stop. Do it another way. And I can pause the machine. And then it gives me an answer, but it doesn't stop there. I can say, hey, you know what? This is really helpful text, but are there diagrams that can help me better understand this? Or maybe convert this into a diagram. It's really bad right now. The diagrams are pretty horrible, but it shows the promise of being able to have agency of how I want to communicate this information to somebody else. It shows me the sources. It shows its work. I can go to that source and I can say, do I trust this source? Maybe I don't want you to reference this anymore. Maybe I want you to go here instead. And of course, it gives me suggestions for where I might go next, and it lets me continue to interact with it. This is a completely different way of interacting with information. It's not perfect. It's biased. Some of the sources might be wrong, but it puts me, the user, in the driver's seat. So I think this is just a really interesting example of some of the ways that we're seeing this interactivity manifest in new patterns. We're all familiar with this concept, don't make me think. Allow me to achieve my task with as little friction as possible. So how are some of these patterns allowing me to do this as a user, as somebody who's trying to interact with this machine? This is a pattern I've been calling a template. Kind of looks like one. Mad Libs as well is another sort of manifestation of this. Now, I don't know if I agree with this use case of going and using AI to create LinkedIn posts, but that doesn't matter. Again, people are going to do crummy things with technology and with the internet. So we're not here to judge the use case. Let's just look at the interface. What's happening here, this is copy.ai, is they have an entire template library, and you can create your own, to just help somebody complete a task more easily. This is something that somebody has to do. This is a real pain in the butt. Well, now the technology can let me do it easier just by putting some basic information in there. And I can see the prompt that's going to go to the computer. Here's a photograph from Klarna, where you might have a receipt and you want to say, where is this coming from? Well, it could be really hard for me to go into some kind of support documentation or additional information behind this. I can just ask the AI, look at this picture and tell me what's going on here. Another pattern we're starting to see is this showing your work, the citations that I mentioned earlier. Again, if my goal is to get information that is credible, getting the information part is fairly easy right now with Google, but knowing whether or not it's credible is quite difficult. That takes quite a bit of work, and it can be hard for people to know how to do that well. Well, here, the AI does it for me, and that actually starts to expand the way we think about this. Maybe it's not just don't make me think. Maybe it's also, well, maybe don't make me work as hard, because that's friction too. If it takes me time to do something, to double check my work, how many people are going to always do that? Not everybody. How many of us get bombarded by Slack notifications all the time? Nobody? Oh, okay, all of us, right? It's horrible. I'm really intrigued by the way that Slack is integrating AI into their product. This is a screenshot from their marketing page. Remains to be seen how this actually plays out. But again, they're taking what is a lot of work, time-consuming, drudgery, going through and reviewing some conversation and catching up, and they're saying, hey, let's summarize this for you. And then maybe we'll point you to a few places where you might want to dig deeper. Let's help you find the sources. Here's another example from Product Board. This is a product management software. One of the things Product Board does is it aggregates insights. So your whole customer-facing team might be going out and bringing back the voice of the customer. Great idea, really hard to go through. And for designers, for researchers, for product managers, often it's work that goes unrealized because you don't have the time. Well, what if we can automatically summarize that for you and then point you to the insight where that came from? A great example could also be pulling from user research reports. Here's Notion, how Notion is used, or nope, Notion's on the next one. This is Salesforce. Let's say you are a technical support professional and you need to help somebody and you need to go get information about their case. Again, it's hard to do, it's hard to keep organized, it can lead to degraded customer experience if it's difficult for me to do. Well, maybe the AI can just say, hey, here's some information you might need. This is helpful. Here's the support documents that could help this person in their case. A human might even still be involved, but I don't have to work as hard to create a great experience. And then, as I mentioned, Notion is doing this as well, and you can see that same thing. You've got the citations, the ability to talk to the AI. Hey, actually, don't grab me that. I want something else. So it's this idea of like aggregating information, but keeping me in the driver's seat that's powering a lot of these patterns. A couple more examples here. This is from Shopify. An interesting thing about this is the use of multimodality. So you have a data form or a data sheet, and you need to draw insights from it. How can we convert that more easily into something that could be shared, like a graph? I can change my voice. I can tell the AI what I want it to sound like, depending on who they're talking to. And I can actually produce artifacts based off of that. So these are all things that people have to do that take time away from the things we want to do. Manage Slack notifications, go through data sheets. Don't remove the ability for me to go back to the primary source and perform the task, but make it easier for me to get started. Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep extending this. There we go. Don't make me wait. Another thing, like if it takes a lot of time for things to load or for me to get a response, people are impatient. People are being bombarded with information all the time. How can we get people to value faster? Character.ai, a really interesting product to explore, and by the way, one of the most heavily adopted consumer AI products, so it's definitely worth playing around with it. It comes pre-populated with these various AI bots with different purposes, so you can immediately dive in and start to interact with it, get a feel and a taste for it, get comfortable with it before you create your own. This is actually an early screenshot from Perplexity. They've moved away from this a little bit, but what I love about this example is it shows how you can intersect the AI mid-process. So you see this if you're like working with ChatGPT and you start to type something and then the response is not what you want, you can hit stop. That's really cool. Can you imagine if you were on Facebook and you were getting a bunch of ads and you were like, please stop, I don't want to see this, reset. So there's just, again, really interesting agency of being able to control it. How could we make that control easier? I don't have to search for the words. Just, yeah, make it shorter, make it longer, make it snappier, make it more professional. Let me play with it. Let me shape the clay. And finally, and now we get back to that like black box problem. All of this is happening at the interface level. I don't know what's happening behind the scenes. That's one of the challenges with AI. But we're even seeing that emerge as new patterns that remove the guesswork. Don't make me guess about what's happening. Show the work, right? Claude.ai, which, again, if you haven't played around with the different models, is an alternative to OpenAI's ChatGPT. You can actually go into their playground, and many of these products have playgrounds, and you can put in a prompt, and it'll show you what prompt it's actually going to use. This is really interesting. AI creates its own prompts. This work is happening behind the scenes, whether you know it or not, but it actually exposes it to you. So you can see what its logic is doing. Midjourney. We were talking about this yesterday, actually. Midjourney will tell you what tokens it's relying on to generate an image, or actually show you what tokens it can read from an image. You can play around with it. You can see the bias in action. You can see the logic in action. You can even just ask it. If next time you're in ChatGPT and you get a response and you go, where on earth did that come from? You can say, what prompt did you actually use to generate this? What tokens are you relying on? And you can see which of your words it's pulling out and relying on. We could make this better. I think this is a design problem that needs to be solved, is how is this more discoverable, but it's there. And I think that's a really cool thing. I don't have time to go into this, but I just wanted to make sure we mention this. The basics still matter. The fundamentals still matter. We're still interacting with technology. We still need to follow the common heuristics of UX, but we're also seeing new ways of thinking about quality and accuracy and user experience and user trust. So this is a list of things that I've started to document on my blog, Shape of AI. you can actually go in and you can read it, but I don't think this is exhaustive. I don't even know if this is right. But forming our own sense of what good means is the best way for us to start to be intentional about how we're using this technology and applying it. So, okay, we've got all these new interaction patterns. What else is happening? Well, there's a lot of opportunity here, but there's also a lot of challenges. Like, AI can hallucinate. This is hilarious to me. We spend 80% of our waking hours plotting revenge. I'm a Scorpio, so like maybe, but like what is happening here? It's drawing from something on Pinterest, you know, like this is where showing the work, making it easier for people to see what's happening behind the scenes, the sources and so on is so critical. It also just gets lazy. This is really interesting. Last winter, there was a bunch of research that there might be some seasonal affective disorder that AI goes through, that it's actually not as responsive in the winter. That's pretty funny. I like literally started yelling at it. I was like, create the table. And it just didn't want to because it didn't want to expend the credits. You should take a picture of this and go read this article. This one's really funny. It turns out that AI is better at prompting than humans, but it makes the most ridiculous stuff up in order to do it. So if you ask it to like create a prompt, it'll go captain's log. Your job is to analyze this SaaS software. You are barking into a magical place in the universe to go and review these, whatever, adoption statistics. It's ridiculous. Maybe the ridiculousness is funny, but it also can be challenging. And then there's all these patterns starting to emerge now that are probably going to get outdated once we realize the AI is better at this than we are, this being prompting and logicking itself. So we should be mindful of this. Very demure. Okay, we're getting to the end. As I said, I have a lot more questions than answers. So as I start to wrap this up, I want to share some of the questions that I've been pondering that I think are very critical for us to start to develop a perspective on and let these lead our dialogue as opposed to AI good, bad, AI right, wrong, and so on. How could AI help us get past the flattening? How can it show us the bias? How might it actually make us more self-aware about the ways we've already been kind of consumed by the algorithm? That's a really interesting one. How could this constraint actually help us? How can it give agency back to people? What could that look like? What does that look like for your product? You know, a lot of these examples are B2B. A lot of our problems are consumer. That's a bridge we need to cross. So what could that look like? How might it actually help us deal with some of the mundane aspects of our job? If you're worried about losing your job to AI, here's the best thing you can do tomorrow. As you're going to work, not tomorrow, whatever, as you're going to work next week, sit down with a piece of paper, and every time you do something that's repetitive, that's mundane, that you wish you had somebody else to just do it for you, write it down. That's the stuff AI is going to do. That's the part of your job that's probably going to go away. And everything else, hopefully, is the stuff you care about, hopefully is the stuff that's more strategic. That's how we can be thinking future-friendly, is how can we actually be proactive in adopting this so that we're prepared? And the big theme here is this starts with us. It starts with coming back to this place where we are the ones talking to the machine. The machine isn't blasting at us. There's a reason I chose this as the intro image. Is AI the rock or the lighthouse? What does a lighthouse do? It just shows us where the rock is, right? All of these problems that we're dealing with, AI was coined back in the 1950s. These problems feel pretty new, these big, weighty problems of these biases and all of that. So is AI the problem, or is AI a technology that can be deployed in very problematic ways? Because the real problem is the incentives of our businesses and the ways that we operate and communicate and use our time. What if we didn't call it artificial intelligence? Remember, the term only exists because these scientists didn't want to make anyone feel left out. What if we called it something else? What if it was augmented information? I can take something and I can turn it into another form. I can take something and I can use it to go and find other things more easily. What if it's augmented interaction? I can now interact with computers and with products and with each other in new and different ways, right? How does that change our perception of it? And what parts of the scary stuff still stick around and maybe which feel less daunting? This slide could probably be like 45 different bullet points. What can we be doing to ready ourselves? What is your AI literacy? Even if you feel kind of disgusted by it, how familiar are you with it? Are we tinkering? Are we actively using it and developing our own perspectives of the good things and the bad things as we're designing with it? What are the things we're blind to? We're going to need to get out of this like linear double diamond design process and then go ship it to engineers who go build with the AI. We have to see what the AI does because the experience is the AI. The users are the ones creating their experience now. So how does that change our design process? How do we prototype with others? How do we prototype with different technologies? And then coming back to this outcome orientation, what is the person trying to do in the first place? How can we use this to drive the experience? So in summary, what is the shape of AI? We are the ones deciding that, not the computers. Humans shape it, and more specifically, humans shape the systems that shape AI, the companies, the incentives, the teams, the communication structures. And Conway's law is like, I just love to come back to this. This is this idea that the communication structures of teams will result in the product. This is the shape of AI. Are we talking to each other? Are we talking to the engineers who are implementing this work? Are we talking to the people to understand how they are using it? This is the thing that's going to dominate where we go with these interaction patterns and with these experiences. And these are all the questions left and more that I don't have time to talk about right now. And maybe these will be your talk next year. Because this is not a binary problem. This is not a good, bad problem. This is not this is the answer, this is what AI means. This is a big, wicked meeting space that we get to go and discover. So if I were to leave you with one piece of advice, it's keep your light on. Be the lighthouse, shining on these problems. Help others find a way through them. Help yourself find a way through them. Don't be daunted by it. And recognize that this technology is with us, but we're the ones guiding the ship. So, thank you so much. Excited to talk with you all over the next few hours.
Thank you so much.